Well, thank you so much for staying with us. Let's begin this morning with that topic you've seen on your screen. It's been said that it is easier to get into conflict than to come out of it. And every war has its consequences, of course, whether for the aggressors or for those who are the victims. Certainly, nearly everyone that survives a war lives with painful memories of its devastation. Those who are victims of what happened in 2014 will not forget in a hurry. It's this month, actually. This month makes it exactly 10 years since the Chibok abduction. Several other issues to look at concerning this one. Now, many observers thought that early non-military intervention and timely mediation at the outbreak of violence could have saved West Africa the ongoing brutal war that's going on in the Lake Chad region. The same would have prevented the recent mass murder of hundreds of citizens in Zaire that is now nurturing the culture of violence in a region that often chooses violent confrontations over mediation in dispute resolutions. Let's have this conversation this morning around managing conflicts without the military with Onyekachi Adekoya, who is a security consultant here with us in the studio. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have Pastor Ladi Thompson, also a security consultant, joining us virtually this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, he will join us shortly. Well, Mr. Adekoya, that conversation hasn't gone poof. It's still a reality that we have to confront. There is that argument making the rounds about the military doing the work of the police, and there is also the argument from former military officers who say, look, it is part of the responsibility of the military when called in to intervene in internal affairs of state. But then what is of concern to a good number of people now is it seems the military has decided to take over the work of the police, so to speak, to a large extent. And all of that intervention is no longer just an intervention, almost like a duty of the military now. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so it's an issue, really, one we have discussed several times in several fora. I can assure you that senior officers now, I shouldn't say all senior officers in the military, certain senior officers in the military, and even in the curricula of training for the military, begin to see that the non-kinetic approach has significant benefits. But to your statement, it's conditional when called in. You see, so you say, what is the root cause of we as a people having to call in the military every time? And it's pretty much like the electricity issue you were discussing before we came on air, or the dollar issue. As a matter of fact, I've been following Reno Mokri lately, who's been saying, buy Nigeria, wear Nigeria. There's some sense to some realism that we must come into in this period, that we must adjust our thinking and begin to fashion out local approaches to the myriads of problems that we face. Because the assumptions we've made over the years were based on certain faulty principles. For example, Nigeria today has almost a population of 229 million people. There are external factors. Imagine the our court's procession that took place yesterday. It's a global phenomenon with the Shiites, leading to loss of life. So it's a more highly dynamic society. There's social media, there are improved means of transportation. So you're dealing with a very fluid society. Having too much regimentation, as the pillar upon which you run national security, we would always have its challenge. So back to your question, why do we always feel the need to call in the military? It's because we, over the years, have learned to plan poorly. Over the years, we've not learned to stop. There's something you do in the humanitarian sector that's called you have to pause, reflect, and then you push forward. So we've not done that stop, reflect effectively. There are certain conversations going on like the one you're bringing up, questioning why do we always have to call the military? It's a good question. And the reason why we always have to call the military is that there are structural imbalances. It doesn't look like I'm sounding very high speaking.
No, what bothers me about all this is not whether or not we call in the military. It's the suggestion a number of people are also making the rounds with that. In fact, there was a conversation I had with, we had on one of our programs, that the fellow said, this whole idea of making the police what it is today started in the military, when the military was in power, and that but now we are either not finding it easy, or we don't even know how to return to the proper thing to do, which is to apply the police and restructure the police into a civil environment, so to speak.
Correct. Now, so good enough. I think the problem is also ingrained in our national psyche. For example, you're a journalist, of course. If you were to call a security expert on issue of internal security, your producer would probably recommend a retired military person or a retired police person. And if you check, 9 out of 10, with profound respect to them, when you invite them to talk about civil issues, issues of public safety, they just beat about the bush because they are not used to the democratization of security, which is the point you are coming to. And I agree with the sentiments that seem to suggest that, yes, the military, in holding power, ensuring regime protection, over the years, have put down seemingly other agencies. For example, we're just having to rebuild the Air Force. We're just having to rebuild the Navy. Because, you know, it's always the Nigerian Army and every other agency is a support function to the Army. So yes, there is that part. The other bigger part is that the people who seem to make law, for example, if I check, the last security advisors to even the Senate President has been retired military officers. We've been on this set querying why we should have an NSA who is retired military. We now have an NSA who is not retired military, but you see the military running around the NSA.
Retired police.
So retired police. No, retired police is even still okay. The president set up a head of a national counterterrorism center, a retired military general. Meanwhile, we have a counterterrorism unit of the Nigerian police force. And counterterrorism is best handled by the police, not the military. If you're doing a counterinsurgency, yes. So the political
we seem not to be able to differentiate these things you're talking about.
It's because of the level of security. The security culture in Nigeria is poor. Security education is poor, particularly when it comes to the area of public safety. Public order, we are good at it. Get out the police, get out the military. There's an emergency, get in the military.
Does this have anything to do with the fact that we went through decades of being under the military?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's why I said there is a seeming regimentation of security in Nigeria. Whilst in a democracy, you should have the democratization of security, not the regimentation of security. If you let me just land on this, sorry. You call a conference, look at the last election we had. The defense headquarters was making statements on an election. What business does the military have with the electoral process? Nothing. They shouldn't make any statements or comment. Then you have the defense headquarters come out and make statements on internal security. They have no business. The lead agency for internal security is the police. So when you are framing policy, writing laws, if the advisors are ex-military, what exactly do you expect will be the outcome?
Okay. We've since been joined by Pastor Ladi Thompson, a security consultant. Good morning, Pastor Ladi. How are you today?
The pleasure is always mine, you know.
Thank you for joining us. So do you think that because of our long sojourn in military regimes in this country is the reason why we have so much involvement of the military in seemingly civil matters.
Well, you're absolutely right. You have a point there. Because out of the 3 years, you have military 29 to 29. Now, if we have the rule for 29 years, you can imagine the military psyche brutalized the Nigerian. And that's the reason why it's a part of the Nigerian national psyche. We have run of it.
Oh, can you still hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. The audio seems to be a little shaky.
Distorted.
Okay.
Okay, but did you hear me?
Well, we heard you.
Yes.
It's just going on and off, sort of.
Oh dear.
Okay, we'll come back to you, in the conversation.
Okay, Pastor, let me just stay with you.
Let's doctor his audio for a bit. We'll come back to him.
Okay. Mr. Adekoya. Good Lord.
While you're looking for the question. Now, one of the issues that a number of people have, especially, you are not a policeman. You're just a security consultant, and I know that you have...
Not just.
Oh.
I'm a fellow of different institutes of security.
No. There's a reason I put that
There's
out.
a reason why I'm also emphasizing also. because, sorry, okay, go ahead.
Because the reason is, I don't know if you can speak for the police.
I can, actually.
Okay. What do you think will be going on in their minds and psyche every time we talk about the security in Nigeria, internal security in particular, and it's almost always the military that is called upon?
Yeah, so let me first answer why I can speak for the police, because by operational doctrine, the police can't speak out for themselves in terms of operational matters and the constraints that they feel or they experience. Number two, who is a police officer? A police officer is a citizen drawn from the society, given the powers of the other citizens to also ensure law enforcement furthering our collective interests. So yes, everybody can speak for the police because the police should be our police. Okay?
And our friends.
And our friends. Should be. The police can't speak. Because in the military, for example, the Nigerian army is at the core of our efforts, military speaking. The Air Force and the Navy are to support the army. That's why you see that the army has the larger numbers, and then Air Force will play maybe close air support function, or the Navy, whatever it is. We now seemingly put the police and every other paramilitary sister security agency, when you do a pecking order, you put them under. It's an aberration. One of the cardinal principles in a democracy is civil leadership. The military is subordinate to the civilian. So when you hear speak, you say, oh, he's a bloody civilian. Oh, I beg your pardon. I can't be a bloody civilian. I'm a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I pay your salary. So, I'm your boss. Just speaking it as it is. But once you go into that regimented framing, the police cannot speak up because the system says that the military officer is superior to the police officer.
Oh, dear.
Because of their training.
No, you have to give them that training because you see that training is different. One time one guy said, who is the IGP? The IGP is a bloody civilian. Who was speaking? A lieutenant. Because once the IGP retires, he's a civilian really. You may call him out of courtesy, retired IGP, but he's a civilian. You see? So there is that culture of impunity, of disregard for seeming societal norms. And there's a re-engineering and reorientation that must take place in the military. Until we do that, the military would continue to fail and falter in its core mandate of protecting the territorial integrity of Nigeria, not running around chasing rats.
Another issue that has come out of that
Forgive my language, I mean the rats inside the house.
Inside the country.
Inside the country, yes.
All right. There are so many issues around that because you just raised a very, very important issue about collaboration, but we'll come back to that. You know, Pastor Thompson, you want to take him off now?
Yes, Pastor. We used to have traditional conflict resolution methods. Whatever happened to those methods? And is it possible that we revive and maybe tweak those methods a bit and return to them?
Well, that's going to be that's going to be something that's going to require a whole lot of effort. For the simple reason that, like I said to you, out of 33 years of rule, 29 was military. I think what we really need to do is to realize that the militarization of the Nigerian psyche was not something that was done by luck or by chance. Don't forget that if you go back into history of Africa, after the Second World War, out of 54 nations in Africa, at least 45 had military coups.
Yeah.
These things were thought up by minds. And when they take out our young officers to Sandos, to Aldershot, to teach them how to do coups, you find out that they embed them back into the country, allow your politicians to fumble, and then the military boys come in. The military boys are not trained to rule. They don't understand governance. They don't understand diplomacy. They don't understand economics. But they brutalize the conscience of the psyche of the nation. And they have to subdue your cultures that you had before and militarize it. And that's what's happened to Nigeria in a nutshell.
So it is not possible to bring back those conflict resolution methods?
Yes, we can, but not with this architecture of thought. You see, what you are asking for is like, what you need is a surgeon. It requires a lot of thinking, and it requires a plan. First of all, we have systemic problems in the first place. Because once you talk about the ancient conflict resolution methodologies, of course they are beautiful. In this Southwest alone, the Omoluabi conflict resolution is one of the best in the world. But the point now is this, is that in a divide and rule system where people fight without even knowing why they are fighting anymore, how on earth are you going to be able to bring up and standardize? For us to do that, one of the first things that Nigeria has to do, if we wanted to bring back the ancient conflict resolution methods, the first thing we need to do is to declare non-violent communication on the national level as the standard platform for all discourse. When you do that, you begin to build the accord. We look at the different models of conflict resolution. There are global models. Now, what has happened in Nigeria is this. The enforcement of peace is usually the last in practically all conflict resolution models in the whole world. But in the Nigerian Fire Brigade approach, which we borrowed from the military, once there's a conflict anywhere, before you know what is happening, they jump from step 1 to step 6. Step 6, usually, if you ask professionals, is the enforcement of peace, not even managing the conflict. I mean, you are talking about enforcement, militarization.
I don't understand that. How do you enforce peace? You want to answer that for him?
No, so it's a...
Pastor Thompson, I'll come back to you. Pastor Thompson, how do you enforce peace?
Well,
I thought the whole idea was to calm down force. Why use force?
No. You see, what we're saying is this. If two parties have a conflict, in conflict resolution and conflict management, there are steps that you go through. Now, if that conflict cannot be managed, cannot be sorted out, you've looked at the whole thing, you can't find an agreement, nobody is ready to make any concessions, nobody is moving an inch, and there's bloodshed, then you bring in the military, suspend negotiations or whatever it is, and all talks for a season to do what? To protect the value of human worth. So you find out that in Nigeria, once there's a conflict anywhere, instead of going through the standard steps that lead to conflict resolution and conflict management, the enforcement is what we go for. We just bring in the military, and that's it.
Okay.
I hope you understand that now.
Yes, I do, but I'm sorry, Alero. You said we jump from 1 to 6. What is 2? What is 1? What is 2? What is 3? Give us a list. Maybe some other Nigerians can learn from that, and we might be able to do
I think they should just attend simple courses in conflict management. If we do that right now, we'll be turning this into a solid.
You want us to come and pay for that knowledge? No problem.
Actually, there are global standards, but there are differing global standards in conflict resolution and conflict management. So naturally, if you get into a conflict, the strategies, first of all, you need to recognize what the conflict is. You need to be able to, sit down and itemize, listen to the parties involved. You have to reflect. Then you need to talk about responses. Then you need to talk about negotiations and resolution. Now, there are diverse models globally. But I'm saying that if you look at the Nigerian ancient models that we had, for instance, in the Omoluabi, whatever, you'll find out that in the southwest of Nigeria, I'll give you an example. In Lagos, 2 area boys are making noise. They are breaking bottles. Everybody's gathered for a fight. Now, a lot of people from other parts of the country are shocked when they find out that after breaking bottles, making noise, they are talking. While they are talking, they're throwing proverbs and all sorts of things at each other. And the crowd goes home unhappy because sometimes they don't even end up fighting. So you find out that sometimes they say, look at this quote, Yoruba people. They will just make noise, they won't fight. No, it's an ancient conflict resolution methodology that is ingrained into the average child. Now, for us in Africa, these are the kind of things that we can refine and put on a digital platform and present that for globalization. I hope that's easy enough now.
Okay. Well, you want to respond to it?
No. You see, sometimes it's difficult to break down certain things, but if you're speaking to a professional, you understand. He's talking about force continuum, applying force as force becomes increasingly necessary. You use force as the last option. Even then, once agreements are made, somebody must police those agreements. You must have the carrot in this first instance and the stick to whip anybody into shape. So if both of us agree to some resolution, somebody must be able to police that resolution. That's why we say that the state retains the total use of force. So conflict resolution, of course, has to go through those process, but force should be last, is the explanation given.
Mr. Adekoya, does this speak to the lack of confidence in the legal and judicial systems of this country?
Very powerful question you have asked. Actually, we have a self-reinforcing problem. So it's a systemic thing. They say an eye for an eye leaves the whole community blind.
Exactly.
So you bust my left eye, for example, I go to the police and complain, and then the person who busts the left eye is roaming free to bust another left eye somewhere. So 2 eyes gone. The law has not done anything, seemingly. No one has been arrested. No one has been prosecuted. There's no trust or confidence in our criminal justice system. Now, the criminal justice system, we can argue, is also challenged because of the way we do national security. We complain that the judges are overloaded with cases, which we appreciate. But we forget that the investigating police officers are also overloaded with cases. We've heard somebody say on national TV that the police stations don't get more than 10,000 naira a month to fuel their vehicles, and minimum they should have 2 vehicles. How true that is, I don't know. But what do you do with 10,000 naira? When the police tell you they don't have fuel, maybe you can put 1 and 2 together to understand. Will the police, the commissioner of police in Lagos State, come out and tell you that, hey, we're having... No, he can't by training. He has to be on the side of the government, because if the agencies for force, maintain law and order, begin to tell you that there's problem, in Portable's word, for example, when they say a problem, you know that can lead to anarchy. But the question is, are we resourcing the police as we should? Look into the police budget for an example. I've looked into the budget several times. About 90% goes into recurrent expenditure. A miserly 10% will go into capital expenditure. I've not looked at this current budget, but that's been the practice in the last 15 years. And even the capital release will be based on availability of funds, and it's not prioritized. Look at all the military installations and barracks everywhere you see. Clean. well painted, well managed. Look at the police barracks everywhere. It's in a sorry state. So that decay shows you the sorry state of our national policing structure, which trickles down to how we manage incidents and how we ensure full prosecution and how we maintain public order. So if that system is not there, the system breaks down, we always have to call in the military. The question is, why are we always calling in the military?
Well, that's actually one of the concerns of the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tarid Bagbaja, who says at a recent lecture, as the Chief of Army Staff's annual lecture series on the Nigerian Army Resource Center, at the Nigerian Army Resource Center, saying that attending early to issues will nip grievance in the board and prevent imbroglio from developing into a major conflict.
Absolutely.
Now, what that means is what I always quote as the #1 function of the Nigeria police, which is to prevent crime, not to fight crime. How do we enforce that? I've said here, I don't even know how many times, we have been told by those who are in the practice that the first line of defense in our country is the local government system. Maybe I should ask you first, beg your pardon, Pastor Thompson. We have been told several times that the first line of defense in Nigeria, in any country, should be the local government system, the local administration. And it is the same administration so many people believe had been neglected for so long. So, given what the Chief of Army Staff has said, that if we attend to grievances early, we nip in the bud the grievance and we prevent imbroglio from developing into a major conflict. What must we do then?
We must put a reality check here on this. I remember a conversation I had with one of Nigeria's leading lights, the late Ahmed Joda, who described for me in the days when, the native authority was in force. They were riding bicycles and things like that then. And he mentioned how that when the system was changed, how people rejoiced to see this federal structure that came in. Now, what he pointed out was that the native authority system by then was so corrupt that very few people had any confidence in it. Now we're looking at a federated structure where the police is like a pyramid answering to one man on top. And again, we're still talking corruption. We're talking about state policing and all that. Now let us come to brass tacks. When the foundations are destroyed, there's nothing a nation can do. In fact, I think one of the founding fathers of American democracy was the one who said that what they had designed to work as a democratic governance is something that will never work for a people who are absolutely corrupt in their manners. So the truth to be told is this: a lot of the confusions we have here are actually systemic, because our corruption, just like the way the country is going right now, is something that is what we call a deterministic chaos. It was designed to be like that. Let me take us back to something that my learned colleague was mentioning just now. Look, in Nigeria, first of all, if you remember in 1958, they had to convene a meeting in Kaduna because of this issue of justice reform. Because the people who put Nigeria together knew that they were about to do something impossible, mix two parallel lines. Till today in Nigeria, let us look at justice in parts of northern Nigeria in certain states, look at justice in some other parts of the country. Do we have a uniform judicial and penal code that runs across the entire country? Now, the truth is this: the average person in different parts puts his trust in different things. Now, couple that with corruption and tell me how, unless we start thinking, how can we solve these systemic problems? It takes me back to the first Prime Minister of Nigeria, who gave us a council in 1960, Sabaka Tafawa Balewa. This is the same council. Listen, no matter what you do, a corrupt people, whether first responders, 10th responders, even the brutalization of the Nigerian psyche, All these things were designed and they are working the way they should. And the only way we can do these things is to apply what they call algorithms. Now, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa said something in 1960, 7th of October, at the United Nations General Assembly. He said, look, when this conflict starts and the bloodshed is, he spoke about independence, spoke about 3 religions, spoke about the confusions, spoke about the inevitable troubles ahead, and said, when we are ready, we need to write a new program using eternal truths. Now, what is an eternal truth? What he's trying to point out to us is that if we're going to solve all these things that are causing all these problems, the corruption you are seeing in Nigeria, go and read the book written by the British civil servant, something Smith. You will see how they received instructions to nurture corruption in the nascent Nigerian attempt at independence. When you go and study these things very well, you'll find out that our challenge is not that because our people are corrupt, our people are bad, or whatever. We are just not thinking. 2 parallel lines can never meet is an eternal truth. A lie told today, after 1,000 years, would remain a lie is an eternal truth. A foundation compromised, and you want to build on it. Now you say, let me wait 10 years. Maybe after waiting 10 years, the foundation will now be okay. It cannot carry a successful structure. Eternal truth is that light will always conquer darkness. Now, until we embrace these things, look, there's a young ruler, the Olu of Warri, for instance. I'm going to say something to you here. If we want to correct Nigeria's systemic problem right now, first of all, the shambolic democracy that we're operating is not working. The average person cannot relate to it. There are firewalls in the original that we are copying that are not duplicated in what we are doing. So all this talk that we are talking about here, we have to look back to those foundations, because unless we correct those systemic problems, look, the value of human worth is so low and Nigerians are suffering. The youths are suffering. Everybody is complaining, but we keep running around in circles when all we need to do is sit down and think and apply algorithms.
Well, I'm not sure you have actually answered my question. These are very fantastic words you have spoken, Pastor Thompson, but I'm talking about that first line of defense. I know you've gone into history and it is very, very well respected and appreciated. But does this really have anything to do with the fact that today in Nigeria, the first line of defense against security is gone? You talked about the Omoluabi. And I know a town in Nigeria that the moment you enter into the town, the first thing you see in the center of the town is, remember the son of whom you are. Meaning, anywhere you go, everybody knows everybody. I don't know if it's still the same thing now. So there are those who argue that if we take out the first line of defense as we have, we can never have security the way we want it to be, going by what the Chief of Army Staff said, that look, we should nip issues in the bud early before they turn into something we can't control.
I think he's arriving a bit late. He's arriving at least a few decades late. Whoa. For us to apply that. Because the problem, like I'm showing you right now, is that it doesn't even matter if it is family courts that you set up. The truth is this. Nigeria is a corrupt nation today, not because we started it today. Right from the foundation, the seeds of corruption were sown. And when we try and mix parallel lines together, the people who do it deliberately know it's not going to work, and they know it's going to breed corruption. The worst form of corruption is the devaluation of human worth. If you ignore that, and we start setting up whatever it is that we're talking about right again, you're going to find out that no building can stand without a foundation. It's a fundamental, universal, and eternal truth. So we're back again to saying, I don't want us to go into delving into talking about native courts, authorities. The systemic problem right now, if I want to answer the line that you're towing right now, we need to tweak our democracy. The average Nigerian in Kano, for instance, the young Almajiri in Kano, and the mechanic that is in the East, listen, they can't really relate with senatorial seats, governorships. Is it a king? Is it a chief? What is it? We are 200 and something million people strong, and to ideate our people, we might as well tweak our democracy from the 3 prongs that it is right now, and add a house of faith and a house of traditions. I'll tell you something. You want justice? Look at what the young Olu of Warri is doing in his domain over there. Now, can you imagine if we started thinking, let us borrow a leaf from Dubai, from Maktoum, who said, while you are facing a problem, you have two options. You either look at what other people have done and copy it, or you sit down and think and bring up a solution that has never been thought of before. As the leading nation of Africa, there's nothing wrong with Nigeria tropicalizing our democracy by putting in a house of faith and a house of traditions. You will find out that most people will seek redress. There will be justice done if the balances are, if the authorities are properly balanced. If we think things out, instead of going and running around in circles, doing what has been done that has never worked. I told you I had a conversation with the late Ahmed Joda, a very highly respected elder. And he told me of the corruption of the Nature Authority in the early days. And he pointed out that, look, by the time we finish talking about these things, we still arrive at the fact that we have a systemic problem. When a foundation is faulty, you cannot build. Look, let the president run himself ragged. Let everybody jump up and down. Until the nation comes to itself, we were put together to keep failing without falling. What is so difficult to understand about that? And why must we waste the life of our children? Because if we go in this direction, look, the chief of army staff himself is a victim. Look at what we are talking about here. We are talking about resolution, kidnappings, everything all over the whole place. The value of human wealth has sunk to an all-time low. Of course, everybody used to look to the army for as a savior. In neighboring countries, people, once things go bad, it is inside the psyche of the African nation, at least a minimum of 45 out of the 54. It is inside our psyche that we turn to the military as saviors. The idea that the military is a savior was introduced by somebody. The person who introduced it thought it out, injected us with it, and set us into motion with it. And when the first coup came in 1966, it was no surprise to the people who took them up. Look, which African ever knew anything about coup d'etat before? It's a foreign concept. The people who inseminated them did so, planted them back. At the right time, they pushed them in. And then we started the culture of coups, knowing full well that you can't ask an electrician to do the job of a plumber. Look, soldiering is a noble profession. But you don't learn diplomacy, you don't learn economics, there are certain things you don't learn when you go to become a soldier. So the moment you plant a 20-something-year-old soldier to head over, look, I'm going to amuse you because it's time we began to say some truths in Nigeria that should help us. I was having a conversation with one of my respected elders one day, Dr. Chris Okolade, and I was asking him, look, you had a boss who was less educated than you are. You had a boss who was appointed you, who was, you, as in anybody's opinion, who are better qualified to be the president of the nation. But he was like, oh, the same conversation I had with this eminent elder, Philip Asiedu. I said, look, let us call a spade a spade. How does a man who goes to Oxford to study economics and all that come in and answer to somebody whose profession is soldiering? How on earth do you expect the country to turn out? Nothing wrong with soldiering. It's a profession. It's a noble profession. But it was re-engineered and used against us. So if we go around the circles talking about all these things again and again without facing our systemic problems, we must hate our future.
Here's a reaction from somebody who wants to remain anonymous. The police do romance with criminals, that even criminals that have confessed to heinous crimes disappear from their custody. Now they're realizing very late, or should I edit that to too late, that criminals are not sparing them in their arsons. Write petitions to the AIG, they will never get to his office.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it's part of what Pastor Ladi is talking about. Though he's gone very historical, and there is a leg to that. So I always complain about foreign influence operations in Nigeria. Some things we may not discuss extensively over the air like this. But clearly, there are issues that Pastor Ladi is talking about, that if the president is not properly advised, or the leadership of this country is not properly advised, they may not take some of those things into consideration. Because when you're planning security, context is everything. So the external influence, destabilizing internal polity has to be addressed. Then we have to focus more on the local issues. To the systemic thing about why the AIG would not see the petition, the AIG is overwhelmed. Simply put. Two, systemically, And AIG is covering 2 zones at the minimum. Say AIG Zone 2, for example, Lagos and Ogun. Nigeria has over 1,400 and something police stations, and 1 IG is supposed to control it. We say, let's go state police. Some people come, some part in the military also say, oh, we cannot give policing powers to the state. Who says you cannot do that? I heard Leonard Silk, Femi Falana argue that if you give state policing powers to the state governors, they'll become emperors. Who says the president is not currently an emperor? In any case, by the Constitution, the president is as much a sovereign as the subnational governor is. So, if the subnational level can adjudicate and make laws, why can't they enforce laws?
I get that.
So the real problem is that the structure we have is not able to dominate the security space. There are structural gaps that are being exploited because of the way we are doing it. We need to go back to state policing.
You're still talking about, what do I call it, professional security. I'm talking about what, something like what Pastor Ladi Thompson is talking about, the traditional way of dealing with these issues. Before a policeman, even a constable, was called, you have committed a heinous crime. Back in time, you don't call as a policeman. Pastor Ladi Thompson, am I wrong?
To the contrary.
You don't call a policeman until the matter has gone. I mean, you deal with it at home, you deal with it with the traditional ruler and all of those things.
To the contrary, actually.
Really?
Every society had its own form of policing. At the native level, the enforcers were the youths. At that native level you're talking about, the judge jury was the king, or the native chief, or the Bale. There was a structure.
That's the point that I'm making.
So I'm saying to you, police officers are not foreign to our native nomenclature.
No, I'm not saying...
It is the name in which and form they exist currently that you argue about.
My apologies.
Yes.
The point is, I love the word you use, policing. Not necessarily the policeman.
That's what I'm saying.
But policing was not alien to us as a people.
Never alien.
We understood these things before formal security, so to speak, came. So, do you see us, because I think that's the point the Chief of Army Staff is making here. Before you call the military, can we just make sure it doesn't even get past the local level?
No, that's not what the Chief of Army Staff is making.
I'm trying to draw it to that angle. My apologies. Yes. I'm trying to draw it to that angle because clearly, in most instances, we tend to subjugate the police, assuming that they don't have enough manpower, just as you're saying.
Yeah, so I think we're coming back full circle again. So to the Chief of Army Staff, like I told you that certain senior military officers are beginning to read the memo now. That's a lamentation. When you are losing officers and men every other day, when your officers and men cannot transit through the major supply roads in Nigeria freely, without fear of being kidnapped or killed, when your barracks are no longer safe. In fact, when we're talking, a retired Air Vice Marshal sent me a message and said that I should go to the barracks now. Even the barracks themselves are polygamous. The system that pitches the people against its army and the army against its people, the system is what Pastor Ladi was complaining about, that is ingrained in our psychic, must be addressed. But to your question, what must we begin to do differently? I think that's the interest of Nigerians. What we must do differently is state police.
Mr. Adekoya,
yes.
Let me link this to the Constitution. Pastor Ladi, who said something about the army being the way it is. Does that have anything to do with the fact that this Constitution was drawn up for us by the army? So, of course, they will tend to favor themselves. Isn't it time for us to actually sit down ourselves as Nigerians and we, the people, actually formulate a constitution that will give everybody its own duty? Like, let the soldiers know that they are to defend the integrity of this nation, you know, go back to their barracks and wait until they're called upon to do the job that they signed up to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at Section 217, gives the President Commander-in-Chief the powers over all the armed forces of Nigeria. So that section is there. And it is not bad or out of place for you to call the military in times of emergencies. National disaster, you need the army logistics. You know, you call them.
But all this calling you the payer, a common civilian, I mean, all that has to be changed in their psyche as well as in our psyche as Nigerians.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even the Nigerian police calling itself Nigerian Police Force is an aberration. It should be the Nigerian Police Service.
No, they changed their name a number of years ago, and they said they had removed the word force.
No, the force is still there. So it's part of the regimentation and militarization of security in Nigeria. So I agree with you. The Constitution does give the military a role in internal security, but as an exception, not a norm.
But it tends to be more normal now.
It is. So we are discussing the symptoms of a deep-seated problem.
Which is?
The symptoms you're seeing is that what should be an exception has become normalized. But what is driving it is the structural, foundational issues that we have, in the sense that security is no longer local. It's not local.
That's the problem.
It's not local.
That is
if you don't have local ownership, you will drop the ball at different points.
That's the point.
You will create a crisis and a chaos.
Exactly.
For which you will need the military.
That is the point that I was trying to make to you. Now you have come home. Welcome. So how do we take this further? How do we localize? Because all insecurity is local.
Yeah.
How do we now localize the security ambit of it? That's the issue.
Simple. That's why I've answered you simply. I said go back state police. And let me tell you, the problems.
There are those who have said, just a second, there are those who have said.
We have just 1 minute left.
I said earlier, yes, I know, that we had a system. Local governments had security councils, and there was only one policeman in that council. There is only one policeman in that council, the DPO. You're aware of that?
Yes.
So, and then they had traditional rulers, community leaders, officials of the local government. What happened to that one?
They say, I was going to quote a Yoruba adage that I say you don't use the eyes of yesterday to look at a spirit. At that time before, no property. You can't be going back to that thing. The DPO is still there, sitting there. The problem is a problem of command. Command is at Abuja.
And that
Bring down command to where command will be most effective. And that's why I'm saying go back state police. Let's have the police commissioner retire, live in Lagos State. He's not going anywhere on any posting.
Okay.
We will hold him.
Okay. Pastor Thompson, quickly, what's your response to that in 20 seconds? And
your final word.
Well, the problem for me is this, is that the toothbrush has replaced the chewing stick already. So, in moving forward, we are going to have to be very innovative, creative, and we're going to have to take note of the global context before looking at the local applications. Because like Mr. Adekoya said, we live in a global village today. So if we create a local bubble, ignore the global, it will not work. Now, if we go global, ignore the local, we're in trouble. So we need to sit down, think afresh, and bring original solutions that have never been seen before in any location in the world that will suit.
Both of you have gone traditional today. One said you use the eyes of yesterday to look at today. I don't even know what that means. And then Pastor Thompson, you are saying the toothbrush has already replaced the chewing stick. Okay.
So we have to move on from there. We can't go back.
Well, anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. Pastor Ladi Thompson, as well as Onyekachi Adekoya, both of them security consultants. Thank you so much for your time this morning, gentlemen.
Thank you,
truly appreciate it. Okay, let's hope that those who need to have taken some learning from that, and there will be action. All we can do is lay the agenda, discuss it, and present the facts for action to be taken by those who should. We're back right after now to talk about another one that's affecting you even more than you're aware of. Stay with us.